Assalamualaikum everybody. Welcome to the Prime Time. My name is Ida and I will be your host today. Our present topic is related to mental health. But before we get started, let's wait for a couple of minutes so the rest of our friends can join. Inshallah. Assalamualaikum everybody. Welcome back. Let's start. Let's begin with the name of Allah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Today, our speaker will help us understand how to maintain a healthy balance in our overall well-being. She will pay special focus on how to be a mentally healthy and emotionally content individual. Today, our speaker is Sister Madiha Harun. She lives in Chicago, Illinois. She has an MS in Marriage and Family Therapy from Northern Illinois University. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a licensed clinical professional, and a cancer-certified alcohol and drug counselor with over 18 years of clinical experience. She works with adolescents, adults, couples, and families, and she has written many articles and has presented both locally and internationally. Sister Madiha, we welcome you and please come into the mic.
Assalamu alaikum. Everyone, can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect. Well, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Jazakallah khairan for having me today. It is a special thanks to the MCNA team for organizing such amazing topics on a monthly basis. And I am privileged that they have asked me to be part of a conversation regarding mental health and mental well-being. especially given as so many of us are facing so many different challenges on a regular basis with stressors, especially given what we had just experienced just last week with New Zealand. So I would just want to welcome all of you guys coming in. I will try to keep this as interactive as possible. So if you guys have questions, feel free to, write in the chat box, and I will try to answer as many as I can. If not, we will have the um, time at the end of the session to answer some of these questions. So before I begin, I am curious, when you guys think about mental health, what comes into your mind? Stress, staying strong. Those are all good answers. Autism, those are all good answers. Sadness, depression, anxiety. Very nice. You guys know annoyed? Very nice. Being happy? You're right. It's all of those things. Mental health is a pretty big topic sometimes, and it's a lot of things that have to do with our daily lives and how they may impact us. So when we think about mental illness, similarly, we think about a lot of different things, right? We think about different disorders that may be affecting us, that are our thinking, our behaviors, and how all of those may be impacting us. Some of those examples of mental illness could be some of these things, like depression, like anxiety, eating disorders, addictions, ADHD, concerns and worry, trauma, a lot of different things. And as you think about all of these things, I want you to think about what that really means for you or the people around you as you talk throughout this hour. Usually, when you think about mental health, we think about three components of health. We think about our emotional well being, our psychological well being, and our social well being. Our emotional well being is our ability to manage our emotions. And we think of emotions, a lot of times we may think about the positive emotions like happiness or excitement or joy. But we also have a whole slew of negative emotions, such as sadness, guilt, fear. And it's about how we are able to manage both of those, positive and negative, that determines our emotional well being, especially when things are a little difficult. Are we able to manage our emotions during those challenging times? That determines how well we're able to manage our emotions and emotional well being. Our psychological well being is knowing what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, how you're doing in an everyday life in terms of how you see yourself, your own identity. Can you see your strengths and can you see your weaknesses? And if you have a weakness and a strength, can you use one to help the other? Right? For instance, let's suppose your weakness is you're always rushing in the morning to get to school on time, but you're pretty organized. That is a strength. So, can you use that strength of yours, which is organization, to help with your time management in the morning? Can you pack everything the night before and be ready? So, because that's a struggle for you in the mornings, you can use that, the other area of your life, to compensate and help. And how well can you do that? That helps determine your psychological well-being. Your social well-being, that encompasses how you are in terms of connecting with people. Can you develop relationships? And if you do develop relationships, can you maintain them? And if there is a conflict in those relationships, how do you resolve them? If you have a disagreement with a friend, with your sister or your brother or even your parents, are you able to resolve those while maintaining those connections? So all of these things can really impact our mental health and our mental well-being, emotionally and psychologically. And a lot of times our emotions, thoughts, and behaviors are very much connected. One can easily impact the other. That's why it is good to take a look at all of those arenas. I'm going to give you an example. Imagine coming home from school and you come in and you see your mom sitting in your living room and she looks a little upset. She'll maybe even look a little bit angry. Imagine as you see her, the thought comes in, uh-oh, I must have done something, so she must be angry at me. Those will directly affect how you're going to feel about that. And that would impact how you're going to behave at that moment towards her or towards others. Similarly, same example, you come in, you see her sitting on the couch, and you see her a little upset, a little angry, a little sad, and the thought comes in, I wonder if she's okay. I wonder if something happened. Your thoughts are much different. They're going to lead to much different emotions at that time and much different behaviors at that time. They're all closely related. And all of these things can really impact our day-to-day functioning. And what I mean by a day-to-day functioning is how are you functioning at home, at school, in all parts of your life? Because when somebody is not feeling to their optimum level, they may have a really hard time struggling. They may struggle at school. They may have a hard time getting up and getting ready for school in the mornings. They may even have a hard time focusing at school and getting their homework done. They may get into fights with their parents. They may have a hard time with sleep. And all of those things can really impact their overall well-being. And a lot of these things are growing pretty tremendously right now. Today in America, a growing number of teens, such as, many of you may or may not have seen anything like this, is experience some depression. Depression is, again, any kind of mental illness is very silent. You don't get to see it. If somebody breaks an arm, you get to see the cast, somebody is hurting, but with mental illness, it's very invisible. So you don't get to see it. Depression is one of them. And right now, currently, it affects nearly 2 million children every year. That is about 3% of the population. And for many who suffer, they could have symptoms such as irritability, feelings of sadness or hopelessness, little irritability, frustration, outburst, fatigue, even thoughts of hurting themselves or self-harm. Think of this example of one student in 8th grade. We're going to call her Ashley. For Ashley, depression hit her from within. Even though on the outside, she had a pretty happy, perfect life. 2 parents, nice home, everything you could ask for. But she was struggling with feelings of unhappiness. In her words, I just wasn't myself. I did not want to live and feel worthless. After letting her parents know, she went to the hospital and started receiving some treatment. Soon she was discharged and started to feel a little bit better. But within a few days, she began planning her suicide. Her parents found out, took her to a hospital again, and again she started receiving some care. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough. Weeks after she went home, she made an attempt. Luckily, her father found her in time and was able to get her to the hospital, and she was able to get even more treatment. And she had a lot more therapists and specialists trying to help her establish a long-term plan to help her. Over time, she was able to control her illness and get the treatment and manage her depression. Many times, kids may not be able to share that with their parents or with other adults, and it could make them suffer in silence even more. So I want you to think about, a lot of times people may come and say, but why is this happening to me? What did I do to cause this? A lot of times, it is not just a one simple cause that somebody may have a mental illness or a mental disorder. It could be a whole variety of reasons. It could be genetics, could be environment, could be something that happened that was pretty traumatic, could be a lot of different things. When you have a combination of all of them that could have a perfect trigger at that time, it could lead to some of these symptoms. But genetics can also play a role. There's a whole field called epigenetics where they did a study to see how how can they determine what is happening in your genes? So what they did was they got some mice, some male mice, and they started associating the smell of cherry blossom with electrical shocks. So every time they would smell them, they would shock them. And that's what the association became for the mice. So they were fearful of cherry blossom smell. And what they did was they bred those male mice with female mice who have never been exposed to that. So they just knew cherry blossom as being cherry blossom smell, nice and sweet. And when they had little baby mice, they wanted to see would they have the same reaction that their dads did. And guess what they found? If you guys had to guess, what do you think they found? Did the babies have the same reaction as the fathers, or did they have it what the moms did? They didn't? Yeah, no, unfortunately, that is not what they found. They found that these baby mice actually had the same fearful response as the dads did. That response had somehow gotten encoded in their DNA at that time, in their genes, and they became on high alert, similarly to what trauma does to people. When somebody's exposed, it could have that genetic composition in them. So those effects can have those implications for generations. But what they discovered with these mice, when they had the proper nurturing environment, a lot of those genetic effects did wean off over time. They didn't last. So I am curious, as you think about mental health and mental illness, how common do you think it is for somebody to have a mental illness? 1 in 3? Very common. Yes, it is very common actually. The numbers are right now 1 in 4. So for every 4 people that you may know, one of them may be struggling with something, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, whether it's ADD, bipolar addictions, could be a whole different things. Sometimes people could even have more than one diagnosis. So their struggle, they have to combine all of those things. And mental illness does not really discriminate. It doesn't say that if you have this, I won't be part of your life. Instead, with mental illness, it can affect anybody regardless of their age, their race, their religion, their cultural background, their financial status, or where they live. It is pretty universal. Even celebrities are not immune to them. So I want to see if you guys know any of these faces that are going to be coming up on your screen. And if you can guess what they may be struggling with. Stress? Could be. All of them, I don't know if you know any of them, so I'm just going to go through all of them and see if you can see which ones they are. Well, the first guy in the suit, his name is Terry Bradshaw. He's an ex-NFL player and a coach. He struggles with depression. Next one, Lady Gaga. She's an actor and a singer. She struggles with trauma and PTSD. Brandon Marshall, he's also an NFL player. He struggles with bipolar. Kendall Jenner, at the bottom, she struggles with anxiety and panic attacks, being in public. Daniel Radcliffe, he played Harry Potter. He struggles with obsessive compulsive disorder and also trouble with alcohol. Ariana Grande, she's a singer. She suffers from PTSD after the bombing at her concert in Manchester, New Kingdom. No one is immune. Even us as Muslims, we are not immune. They did a study at the Gallup Center, and they were trying to discover different things about different families. So this study wasn't just done exclusively on Muslims. They studied roughly about 300,000 families across US, finding different things. And there were a couple things that they found out about Muslims and Muslim stressors that I think we should be aware of. First, they found out that Muslims in general reported more stress, anger, and worry than other people in the general population. In fact, 56% of the people reported that they were struggling with anxiety or depression. They also discovered in the same study that 26% of the young adults between the ages of 18 and 24 said that they have experienced more anger and stress than the general population, which was at 14%. They also discovered in their study that Muslims reported lower numbers of experiencing joy, smiling, and laughing. Approximately only 24% of the Muslims reported being happy, compared to the general population, which was about double. So the numbers were much, much different. So somebody was asking, how do you know if you have mental illness? We're going to get to that in just a few minutes of some of the signs. You heard some of the signs of depression. I'm going to cover the general signs in a few minutes. So you're going to get there really soon. So as I was saying, it's happening within even our community, right? And it happens everywhere with celebrities, with everybody. There's no difference. And anxiety is another very common one that people tend to experience. Some of the symptoms of anxiety may include being fearful all the time. Some of them may be that they may have trouble going to sleep. They may have a really afraid of being alone. They may pick at their skin or bite their nails. They may have a really hard time participating in school or going to school, or even talking to friends and making friendships. They may have trouble with a lot of excessive worry that things are going to go wrong all the time. I'm not sure how many of you know another NFL player by the name of Ricky Williams. He was a Heisman Trophy winner, and these are his words. He said, "I was 23, a millionaire, and I had everything. Yet I was never more unhappy in my life." He said, "I felt extremely isolated from my friends and family because I couldn't explain to them what I was feeling. I had no idea what was wrong with me." Even though he was at the highlight of his life, he had everything, he suffered from a severe anxiety and social phobia. He had a really hard time going out there, even talking to people, even going to grocery stores. He couldn't even interact much with his daughter. Lucky for him, his friends found him a therapist, and he was able to recover from a lot of those challenges. I myself had a client, a 13-year-old boy, and we're going to call him, Adam. He came in and his shoulders were all hunched. He couldn't make eye contact. He was mumbling his responses. He had severe anxiety, so bad that he couldn't even go to school anymore. He said people found him awkward. He didn't know how to talk to people. He was afraid what people were thinking of him. If he said something, what if he says the wrong thing? What if he doesn't know enough about a subject? So he just stayed quiet. And all of these worries were so much that they would overwhelm him, such that he couldn't even get out of bed. At times, he would come to my office, he couldn't even leave his car. His anxiety and worry would overwhelm him. His negative thoughts would make it impossible for him to see other options. Our brains has the capacity of generating a lot of negative thoughts. And when that happens, it gets to be really difficult at times to negate them. So those are skills that a lot of times people have to learn, how to negate these automatic negative thoughts. I know somebody just asked, why are Muslims more depressed and unhappy? My guess would be, in generally, they probably have the same statistics as the general population. For mood disorders right now, it's about 11% in youth, which is roughly about 1 in every 10 people. And my guess would be sometimes Muslims may experience a lot more stressors. And so some of them may have them because of that. Could be different circumstances that may be going on in that person's life. So it could be it could be a struggle at that time. So a lot of them, like I said, a lot of times these things are happening, and it comes a matter of trying to balance all of these things. How do I balance the wellness that comes with it while managing your everyday life. But sometimes what I've also heard that people don't really believe somebody has something. They may say, oh, it's just you're just making it up. It doesn't really exist. It's in your head, right? Well, if somebody is thinking it's in their head, they're not wrong. Your brain chemistry is much different. There's different images that I'm just putting up right now that shows how the brain chemistry is different when you have a diagnosis. And each diagnosis brain chemistry is different. So it is not something that somebody is imagining, because it is getting impacted and it is coming out differently in different people. Imagine this, another 12-year-old right now. I'm going to call her Khadija. Her parents called in saying, she was a perfect student. We had no problems with her. And now suddenly she changed. She doesn't want to do anything, just wants to be on her phone. Her grades have gone down. Teachers are complaining for missing assignments. Before she had no trouble. She had perfect A's without even studying. She was such a good student. Now, her homework keeps getting lost. Her room's always messy, has always been messy. She's never been able to keep anything clean. Her desk always been messy, even in elementary school. Her locker is messy. She comes home, we'll tell her to do something, she'll go up, and then next thing we know, she's on her phone. But she's involved in sports, after school activities, she has lots of good friends, she enjoys life. We don't have any concerns, she's just not listening to us. We have tried everything. We don't know what to do to make it better, how to make her listen. What we discovered was Khadija had ADD. She had a really difficult time staying focused. Some things would get lost. She would do homework. It would just take her a little bit longer. And as she would put it, the homework would get lost along the way between her backpack and the locker. She had a really hard time with organizing and following through. And those are the challenges that were making her difficult to do things at school and succeed at school at that time. So I know somebody was asking a while ago, how do you know if you have something? These are some of the signs that somebody may be struggling with something. When somebody is struggling with depression, anxiety, these are just the general signs. And they include feeling sad or blue, which means you're just not feeling like your normal self at that time. You may have a difficult time concentrating and focusing. You may have a lot of guilt or worry, a lot of concerns. You're pulling away from friends. You stop engaged in things that you like to do. Maybe you like to go running and you can no longer do as much because you don't feel like you have the energy to do that. You feel like you don't have the energy to get up. You feel tired all the time. You're really lethargic. Your sleep may be different. Maybe you're sleeping too much. Really hard time getting up. Or maybe you're not sleeping much at all. Really hard time going to sleep at night. Your appetite may be different. Maybe you're just eating too much, or maybe you're not eating enough. There could be a lot of irritability or frustration. Suddenly you could be pretty calm, but now everything makes you upset. There could be mood changes. You could turn to drugs or alcohol because you don't know what's happening inside, how to make it better. And you could be using them to take away some of that hurt and pain on the inside. Sometimes we don't know what's happening and our body starts aching in different ways. And we don't know what that means because we cannot explain to people that we're hurting on the inside. But we can definitely tell when something is hurting on the outside. My head is hurting or I have a stomach ache. So sometimes those emotional pain comes through physical pain. So why do you think people have a hard time letting people know? Why do you think people have a hard time sharing that they may be hurting on the inside? What makes it hard? They may not understand. Communication issues, yes, that could be it. Because they're scared, embarrassed. They're scared what others might think. Absolutely. They don't know how to explain it to other people. Yeah, they may not have the words. Yeah, they may not know how to let others know. That is absolutely right. There is a lot of uncomfortableness talking about these things sometimes because we don't have the words. We don't know how to say it. We may feel as if we have caused this somehow. We may be concerned that others may not understand what we are experiencing. We may be really, really afraid. You guys are perfectly right on the point. We may be really afraid of others may think of us. If we say, hey, I don't feel so good. I have a really hard time sitting still in my class. Or instead of listening to the teacher, I'm daydreaming. Or when you tell me that I'm going upstairs to get 3 things, I forget what those 3 things are. Just remember one of them if I'm lucky. Letting people know that we are struggling, it is very difficult. A lot of times people are really afraid of how people are going to see them. There's a lot of stigma that comes with it, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. That's maybe somehow I did this to make it happen. And that could be really scary for people. And you may not even know who to talk to sometimes. That's even scary. Who do I even tell people? What if my parents don't understand? What if my teachers don't understand? So sometimes you don't even know. And that could be even scary. So a lot of times people who may be hurting, they may be hurting in silence. Like I said, if you have a broken arm, you are able to get a cast and people know that you're hurting because you have a broken arm. They'll help you, open the doors for you, take your bag for you. They're right there helping you. But if somebody's hurting on the inside, there's no bandage that you can put on you and say, hey, today I'm just feeling depressed, or I'm just feeling really, really bad on the inside today. I feel like I don't have the energy to get up. So a lot of people suffer in silence. It's invisible, right? So we just put on a smiling face and we pretend everything is okay. We don't tell people. We let that be in quietness. And that makes it really difficult at times too, not knowing who you can turn to for your help at that time. So if you know if somebody is hurting, who would you want to turn to? Who can you turn to? You can turn to Allah, absolutely. Allah, absolutely. A counselor, absolutely. Your mom, a counselor. These are all awesome responses. Parents, yes. You can make dua, yes. You can turn to your pet, absolutely. Pets are very therapeutic. These are all great answers. You guys are right on target. You have to remember you are not alone in this. There are many, many resources that are out there. And it's about being able to turn to them for that support, for that resource. So one of the things that you can remember, every school has a school counselor. They're guidance counselors. You can talk to them. You can talk to an adult in your home, your parents, another family member, a teacher, right? Letting somebody know that you are hurting on the inside. Because I know sometimes that could be the toughest thing for you, letting somebody know, breaking that silence. And that's what all of those people did. Those celebrities, when they talked about their mental illness, that's exactly why they did that. The NFL players, those actors and actresses, that's why they did that. They want to let people know that it is okay to talk about this. It is okay to let others know when you're hurting. When you see something, when you feel something, it is okay to let a parent know, a teacher know, a counselor know. So they can help to do that. And I know sometimes it's a great question. Somebody just asked, how do you get your child to acknowledge that they have a problem and they seek help? Similarly, right? You need to start those conversations with each other as a family, right? How do you talk to each other if you're feeling low? It's great to talk about when things are happy and easy, But are you guys able to talk to your mom and dad or to your children if things are not so easy that day? Hey, I'm concerned about you. I am noticing these things and I feel like something isn't right. You're watching a lot of TV right now, more than you normally did. You're not going out with your friends as much as you used to before. You're mostly home. You can let your parents know. I have a really hard time falling asleep right now. My mind is racing and I don't know how to shut it and how to quiet it down, right? A lot of racing thoughts. I'm really struggling with managing my schoolwork. I don't know how to organize my time. It is really a struggle at that time. Letting people know so you're not alone in that one. And hopefully, in a lot of places have a lot of amazing therapists and counselors where you can do talk therapy, which is when you talk to a therapist and they help you find connections between your thoughts, actions, and feelings. Just like we talked about before, how they're all connected. What you're feeling may be connected to what you are thinking and what you may be doing, and how that's going to impact how you are in your everyday life. So, thinking about how you can get those connected and finding different ways, more adaptive ways of being with your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors so they're more productive. And a therapist can help you find resources. As I said, a lot of times when we are within our thoughts, they can become really negative. We actually have a term in the field. We call them ants, ANTS, automatic negative thoughts. I don't know if you guys ever had ants in your house, but they tend to come pretty quickly and pretty fast, right? One day you don't have any, the next day you have a lot. That's what happens with our negative thoughts too. One day you don't have much, next moment you can have 20 million of them. And learning how to negate them could be a great tool to learn. So you can ask yourself, is that even a realistic thought? Is this really true? How true is it that this could really be happening? How true is it that I feel this way or this is happening? Learning to make them more realistic could be a way for you to start learning to negate them and making them more positive and realistic, which could impact how you feel and how you behave at those times. Again, emotions, thoughts, and behaviors are all very closely related. There are other things you can do as well in your life that could be holistic lifestyle, right? That simply means how you live your whole life. A lot of you mentioned Allah. Absolutely. Turning to Allah. There are a lot of du'as in the Quran and Sunnah on just the topic of depression, anxiety, and anguish, right? Making that du'a, making sure that you are praying your namaz and your salah on time and on a regular basis. That is an amazing tool to have because when you're looking at a person, you have to look at all parts of them. You have to look at the spiritual component, how to build that, how to connect that to Allah at that time. You can also look at exercise. Are you exercising? If you're not, how can you incorporate physical activity in your day? Right? How do you make it into so you can exercise a few times a week? Because studies have shown is that when you exercise, you get a rush of dopamine and a lot of good hormones, which actually helps you with anxiety and depression. And it's a lot of benefits that comes with it. Eating healthy meals. Moods are affected by what you eat, right? If you're feeling like you're going to go for the box of cookies and crackers and, chips, that could have an impact versus going for something that's a little bit more healthier, like vegetables and lean protein. Moods are directly impacted by the foods that you guys are putting in. You can also monitor your sleeping habits, which is really difficult at times. I know it's tempting to stay up and get your work done or do something else, but sleep makes a big impact. Study over study have shown when people are getting a good night's sleep, they're able to have better daily functioning. It impacts their moods. Roughly about 7 to 8 hours of sleep on a nightly basis. But many times, a lot of things are impacting our sleep, right? So some of the things that I suggest when people are struggling with sleep is to do a few things. One, take out screen time at least 30 minutes before bedtime. So you can give your mind a break, not just from the light of the screens, but also from the content in your on all the social media and all the things that you may be coming across. So you would need to think about that. How can I do that so I can turn away all my screens at least 30 minutes before bedtime? When I do go to sleep, do I have a bedtime routine? What that simply means, are you able to do things, same things in a sequential order on a daily basis? Let's suppose your routine is you get up, you do wudu, you do namaz, you read, you go to sleep. Then you would do the same sequence on a nightly basis. And your body gets accustomed to, I do A, I do B, I do C, and then I go to sleep at that time. And of course, getting up at the same time in the morning. That is a great way to alter that sleeping habits. Then your body gets used to that amount of sleep that you're needing, which is about 7 to 8 hours. So the best way to determine what time you need to go to sleep is to figure out what time you need to get up in the morning and then do the math backwards, subtracting 8 hours and a little time for the bedtime routine. So this way you're accounting for all the time in there. So doing a lot of those things. Even sometimes when you are feeling as if life is really overwhelming, thinking about how much time you're spending on social media, because that could have a huge impact on how we feel and how we are reacting to people. If you're on social media all the time, it could have an impact on our anxiety and depression. So thinking about monitoring that, especially before bedtime, it could have a huge impact. So living a holistic life where you are monitoring a lot of parts of yourself with sleep, with exercise, with eating, and talking to people, making those connections with family and friends, letting them in when you're not feeling like you are feeling your normal self and you feel like you need to turn to somebody and say, hey, I need some help, maybe, just like you would if your arm was broken, and asking for that help. It's a great way to take care of your life in this way. So, as you have been listening to me talk, I'm curious to know how many emotions have you felt or experienced since the beginning of this conversation? Just a one or two, or tons of them? Yeah, a lot of different emotions, right? And that's what we're going to talk the next few minutes to talk about is emotions. Like I said, emotions, thoughts, and behaviors are all interconnected, right? And emotions sometimes are the most scariest one. We don't know what to do. But many times emotions are giving us a lot of information. But sometimes you may not even know what they are because we don't know how to tell the difference. So being able to label them, being able to experience how they feel different, because a lot of emotions feel different in our bodies. What you may feel when you feel happy may be quite different than what you feel when you are feeling sad. So learning how to tell the difference, what those are, because emotions are more than just being good or bad. Right? I don't know if you guys have seen this movie. It came out a while ago, Inside Out. And in that movie, they were talking about emotions and how in the main character of that movie was ignoring one of the emotions. I don't know if you have seen it, but if you have, which emotion was this person, what the main character trying to ignore? Does anybody remember? Yeah, sadness. The character was trying to ignore sadness, and when she was trying to ignore sadness, it wasn't really helping her, right? It brought in a whole slew of other emotions. So we cannot ignore some emotions because they don't feel so good sometimes. But we can learn from those emotions, right? We can take in what those emotions are teaching us and telling us and what we can do about that. So as in the movie, similarly for you guys too, thinking about how you can use those emotions to guide your thinking and your behavior. What can you take in when you're feeling that sadness? What is that sadness really telling you? How can you use that? When you're feeling angry, what is really going on with that anger? Can you identify? Can you pay attention to it? Can you recognize it? A lot of times when you're able to increase our own emotional knowledge, we can then turn in and learn that that emotional knowledge about other people too. We can develop empathy. How do you guys know what empathy is? What does empathy means? Empathy means being able to relate to somebody, being able to understand them as if you truly knew what they were experiencing, just like you know what you're experiencing. And when you're able to see those emotions in somebody else, then you know what that feels like for you as well. So when you're able to recognize how when I feel mad, I'm going to use that example back to the one that we had used before. When you came in and your mom is sitting on the couch feeling angry and upset, and you saw that, right? That's part of being empathy. You're able to go up to her and say, "Hey, is everything okay? Can I help you in some way?" Being able to recognize that emotion is what empathy is about, being able to connect to people. And when you are able to do that, it helps you build those relationships and connect and helps gain control over your own behaviors and your own actions. So developing that emotional awareness can be a great tool to use in the future. So as I have said, there are a lot of things that are happening, especially with the given times of the stressors of growing up. So I'm going to open it up to see if anybody has any questions. There are a lot of resources that are out there that you guys can tap into. And some of them are the prevention lines and getting some information. So I'm just going to go through some of these questions to see if there are any questions that I have missed. If not, please do let me know if you guys have any questions right now that I have missed. I think I'm not seeing any questions coming in right now. Somebody asked, how can I ask for help? That is a very good question. How can you ask for help? Well, I would begin with having a conversation with your parents, right? Letting them know what is happening inside and letting them know, what are you feeling? What are you experiencing? So this way they can hear exactly what is happening, because they may not realize it. And hopefully from there, they guys can get you some services and some links. Another question that I get asked a lot of times, what happens if I see a friend who is really in a lot of pain, right? Sometimes you can't do much, but you can let an adult know. You can let your parents know, you can let the teacher know, so you can get them those resources, because they may not know how to connect to those resources, but the adults in their life would have access to those services. Somebody had a question. If somebody you know is suffering from depression, what should I tell her? The best thing you can do for a friend who is suffering is to be there for her. Be a resource to her. Let her know that she's not alone, that you understand. And make sure that you're letting an adult know as well, so they can find her services and resources so she's not suffering in silence. Right now, with depression, for the mood disorders, it's about 1 in 10 youth that is affected by that. It's a pretty high number. Like I said, 1 in 4 is suffering with something. So we want to make sure that they are able to talk to people and get those resources built in. Let me just see if I can grab a couple more questions. What are some ways to be a good friend? A lot of ways to be a good friend is simply to um, be there for them, connect with them, be able to ask them if they need any help, and if they are in pain, ask them what you can do to help them in the process. How can you show people what you are feeling? Well, you may want to start with your parents at that time. Let them know what's happening on the inside. And let them know that if you are feeling any sadness or depression or anxiety, that you're not just keeping it inside of you, but you're actually letting people know. So this way you're not hurting in silence at that time. Somebody, let's see, I think I'm getting most of these questions. What does, how do you help somebody who is suffering with losing somebody? Um, they may need just to know that you are a good friend who can be there for them, that you can be a resource, that you can let them a shoulder to cry on at that time. Let's see, I think I got almost all the questions in, just about. If there are some, what does anxiety means? Anxiety, I believe I read you some of the signs before. I will be happy to review them again. Anxiety is when you get this overwhelmed sense of overwhelm, worry, and concern. Some of the things that are common with children is that they may have a lot of worry about things, difficulty in school, they may be scared, they may be trouble falling asleep, afraid of being alone, picking skin or nail biting, disruptive behavior, trouble with interacting or going to school at that time. How do you know who to ask for help? Well, you begin, if you don't know who to turn to, you can always turn to your school counselor at school. They would have the resources and the numbers, and your parents, letting them know if you are feeling that you are by yourself and you have any of these signs that we have talked about in this hour so far, that you are that you're wanting to talk to somebody. There are a lot of professional therapists and counselors out there who could be your resource. There is no need to suffer in silence. Like I said, this is a silent epidemic. And we need to be able to say to people, just like you're hurting with a stomach ache, you need to be able to let people know if you're hurting on the inside as well.
Sister Madiha, I see a question here. What do I do if I get bullied and can't stand up or tell an adult because of depression?
Oh, I missed that question. Okay, what was the question again?
So what if I get bullied and cannot stand up for myself or tell an adult because of depression?
Oh, that's a tough one, right? There's a lot going on with that person. I would start off with bullying. There are two things, right? You want to make sure the school knows, because schools tend to have a lot of measures in place to help you with anti-bullying, so they can address that with the person who's bullying you and provide you a safe environment. And letting the counselor at school know as well that you are experiencing that depression and what that feels like, and even letting your parents know that you're getting bullied, but in a way that hopefully they can understand what that experience is like for you. If you feel like your parents may not be able to understand that, see if the counselor at school can help your parents understand what that experience is like for you. Help for those resources that are out there. School counselors are at times underutilized. We don't realize that they are a great resource for students at school. They can help intervene and connect you to those resources. Did I miss any other questions?
There was another one. It was, how do I help a friend who has lost somebody?
Yes. That is a really good one. How do you help a friend who has had a loss? right? A lot of times when somebody is going through the grieving process, they really just need to know that somebody is there for them, that they're not alone in their loss and in their grief, because grief is really hard, and losing somebody, a loved one, it is really difficult process. And sometimes a friend just needs to know that you're there. So just being there for them, spending time, it doesn't mean that you have to do anything special. Just even just sitting with them and letting them know that, hey, I'm here if you need me. You can call me whenever you need to, and I will always be there for you to listen, to talk to you. So being a friend and being available to them. What does grief means? Grief is simply that sadness when a lot of people experience when they've had a loss, right? If somebody has died, or even, you can even have grief when somebody has moved to a new city. Let's suppose you're living in one city and a friend moves to a different city. You can be grieving the loss of that friendship. So grief can encompass a lot of those feelings of having a loss of any kind.
One other question is that I have two friends, and one friend is really good, but the other friend comes and then takes this friend away, and then the other people, they make fun of my hijab. How do I get out of it?
So a friend takes away the other friend?
Right, and I guess she must be left alone,
Yeah.
and everybody else makes fun of my hijab. Then how do
Yeah.
I get out of it?
Yeah, that's a really tough one as well. Absolutely, because I know it is important to have friends and they mean so much, because we need that. Like I said, we have that part of our well-being, which is social well-being. We need to have connections and friends. So maybe you need to really consider what you consider to be a good, healthy friendship and what that really looks for you. Maybe thinking about and defining for yourself, when I am looking for a friend, I look for, and defining what those characteristics are. Whether it's somebody who's there for me, somebody who's loyal to me, or somebody who has, who is has a certain kind of characteristic, somebody who's a hijabi or somebody who has a similar level of iman that you do, different levels of characteristics that you want, and finding friends that are able to fit what you're needing at that time. Hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, another one is, if I bite my nails and have trouble sleeping, does that mean I need to get help?
It depends. I don't know. Sleeping issues are across many different reasons, right? So trying to figure out what that trouble is from sleeping. So having to decipher, because a lot of different reasons, it could be bad sleeping habits, could be that something may be going on. Biting nails could be anxiety related, or it could simply have become a habit. So maybe talking to somebody and figuring it out if is due to something, or it just become habits over time. So there has to be that distinction between a diagnosis versus just some habits that needs to be altered.
Okay, and then if you're new in school and you're scared, does that count as having some kind of mental illness?
No, it sounds like it's a new experience, right? Adjustment to a new environment is always difficult. So if you're new to an environment, of course, it's going to take some time to get accustomed to that environment. So maybe finding somebody in one of your classes that seems friendly and talking to them and sitting down with them during lunch and making friends might help some of that adjustment to happen for that new school environment.
Okay, and another one is, we'll take inshallah just a couple more because it's 8 o'clock. We'll just maybe quick couple more. One of them is, how do you make yourself feel happy when you're depressed and you have nothing to look forward to?
Yeah, I think at that time when somebody is feeling as if nothing to look forward to, I would really recommend that you let your parents know that, and you really seek some professional counseling at that time, because it seems like if something is happening to that extent that you have nothing to look forward to, you may want to go and talk to a counselor and see if they can help you find ways to overcome and manage some of the depression that you may be experiencing, because we can't do it alone. And I know it's the hardest thing, but just like when you have a broken elbow and you can't fix it yourself, you need to go to the doctor to get that cast put on. Same thing when you're feeling that you are feeling that depressed and that low, you can't do it by yourself either. You did not cause this, has nothing to do with you. There's nothing you could have done to prevent it either. But there are many things that you can do to letting your parents know to get you that help so you can go on their journey of recovery, of feeling better.
And then how do you deal with Islamophobia in school?
Wow, that's a big topic. I think that would require a whole presentation on its own, right? Because it is such a dominant thing right now, unfortunately, with a lot of media. So letting, again, it's going to be about building resources around you, because if you have a resource around you, you may be able to not feel so alone at that time. Making sure that you have friends, you're able to talk to the counselors at school if you experience any bullying, any kind of negativity. So you're not, again, experiencing it in silence, but you're turning to the resources that are in school and the adults around you. So asking your parents or another adult in the community to let them know, so you don't have to deal with this alone, but the adults can help talk to the school to create an environment where it is more friendly and more receptive to either hijab wearing or other anything to do with Islam at that time.
I think this is our last one, inshallah. And alhamdulillah, I think as parents, we do have a lot of expectations from our children. But what if they're feeling stressed? That as parents are expecting a lot from them, and they're feeling stressed, but they're not telling us. So how should they deal with that?
The kids are feeling stressed or the parents are feeling stressed?
The kids are feeling stressed.
Kids could be feeling stressed, absolutely. So how can the parents can tell? I would do check-ins, making sure that the expectations that you have are realistic and if they're manageable. If you start noticing in any of the symptoms that we had talked about before, changing in sleep, appetite, moods, giving up things that they enjoy doing, pleasurable activities, any of those, and that could be a point of concern at that time, because in the stress, it's not a stress that the child is able to handle, but it is manifestation is coming out in different ways. So being paying attention to how and what the expectations are, and if the child is able to handle it, and if even if they are able to handle it, how is it coming out? Are you seeing signs and symptoms? And if you are, then that is a conversation to have with that child at that time.
Right. No, what if the child is feeling stressed, but they don't know how to communicate with the parent? So we're not looking at the parent point of view right now. We're looking at the child
Okay.
feeling stressed and doesn't know what to do.
Right. So I would begin again letting your parents know, hey, I know you want me to get or do all of these things, but that is really hard for me. Right? Having those lines of communication with your parents to letting them know that you are starting to feel some of those symptoms or signs. I'm having a really hard time sleeping, or my appetite's changing, or I'm not feeling really well on the inside. I'm feeling really overwhelmed, really anxious. Letting your parents know so they are aware, because they may not know because it's in silence, right? It's invisible. So letting parents know, so this way they are aware of what the effects of that stress is on you, so they can then get you the help or alter the expectations or whatever the case may be, so it could be talked about as a family at that time.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. Ira, can you please come on the mic?
Yes, assalamu alaikum everybody. Jazakallah khair, Sister Madiha, for taking your time out of such an amazing session. Inshallah, we all benefited and we'll take something from this session, and inshallah, we will share what we have learned to help benefit others as well as ourselves. Thank you all for joining today. Inshallah, see you next month for another amazing primetime session. And to close it out, I'm just going to do a small dua. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all. Have a good night.
Assalamu alaikum.